Hi, this video concerns the elimination of the categories of media that a student can choose when designating what they use to produce their artworks for VASE. We eliminated all of these different categories of media because of the advent of so many different amazing tools that students are able to use these days in order to produce art. For instance, before with VASE, you were always able to go in and select this is a charcoal drawing, this is a painting using oils, and even different types of electronic media. But it got to the point where we realized that there were a lot of different tools out there now that students are using to produce art, and that they're being exposed to produce art that have no designation or are easy fit in a category. For this reason, we felt like it was best just to eliminate the category of media completely. And that way, the jurors, yourself or a worker at VASE, can judge and look at a work based strictly on the design qualities of it. Is it a good piece of art? Is the design quality of it good? Whether it's done with oil pastels or whether it's done with a laser printer or a 3D printer. So this is the consideration. For instance, let's say that a student did a beautiful design on paper and then took it and used a 3D printer and actually produced it in a three-dimensional form. So what was that student supposed to do? Well, will the student need to designate it as a 3D sculpture? And okay, what was the sculpture made with, where it was a plastic? But the thing was that the actual sculpture itself was produced by the machine. The design was produced by the student, but the sculpture was produced by the machine. And so if the student is designating it as a sculpture, then judging it on the basis of a sculpture isn't really fair to those students that were actually hand building a sculpture. So what were we to do about that? We don't want to in any way to disqualify these pieces of artwork just simply because the students used something innovative in order to produce it. So by eliminating the fact that the student had to actually designate what the medium was, in this case it would have been a 3D plastic, all they have to do is say that it's 3D or it's 2D, and then the juror can judge it based strictly on the quality of the design, the original design. Another instance would be that if a student took a photograph of a friend and then they used a laser printer to either produce an intaglio metal plate or maybe to do a wood burning piece on wood. And in both cases, they are using a mechanical means that they might not have had before, or before they might be etching the metal with a ground, or they might have been using a wood burning stylus. But in this case, they actually used a machine to produce it. So what happens then is the juror has to step back and judge the artwork based on the quality of the design itself, the quality of the photograph that was used to produce it. This is not an original photograph, not a photograph that they took and plagiarized, but an original photograph. So is the composition right? What about the density of the darks and lights, the contrasts? So you're judging it based on the quality of the design of the piece rather than on the actual technique of the wood burning or the technique of the etching into the metal, because that was done by a machine. Another instance would be when a student would take a beautiful photograph that they did of a still life in their classroom. They took the photograph and then they took it and they printed it on a piece of paper and then they went over it meticulously with colored pencils, basically kind of a paint by number sort of thing. Well, we can't, before they would have to enter that under colored pencils, and we would have to disqualify it because technically it's really not colored pencils. They just simply painted by number. What it really was a photograph that's been enhanced. So this is, by eliminating that type of designation, what we're doing is eliminating the difficulty of having to disqualify these pieces of innovative artworks that are being produced by mechanical means. And so the students can then take, then the juror can take and judge it based solely on the design of the original piece. Like again, the composition, the density, the darks, the lights, the high contrast, any of the things that we judge regular hand-built types of artwork on. This opens up all types of possibilities for students, and that was the intent. The colleges and universities, if you visit them these days, are using all of these amazing mechanical means to produce art. But the original part of it still has to be good. And that's the part the student does at the beginning, which is the design quality of it, the actual basis of, is this a good piece of art based on how the student composed it and whether it was designed well. Hopefully, this video will help you kind of understand the situation with the lack of having a medium designated within the student's artwork. Even if you have a mixed media, sometimes that doesn't exactly tell the picture. Also, by doing that, we changed the intent form on the back or attached to the artwork, either on the back or attached to it like a three-dimensional piece would. We took number 3 and 4 and combined them together and have the student not just talking about the techniques of what was used and the elements and principles of art, but actually taking and combining them and explaining the process of what they used. I took a photograph, I used a 3D printer. In other words, they're having to explain it. This actually makes it better for the juror because then you can understand the whole process. So when you're judging today, or whenever you get ready to judge as a juror, then make sure that you really pay attention to this and question the student and ask them about all the aspects of how they actually created the artwork. And then when you step back on it, base your judgment on it, the assigning of numeric value to the rubric. Make sure you do that based on the design of the work. In other words, is it a good quality piece of artwork rather than just on the skill of the process of it, because the skill of the process might have been done by some type of mechanical means. Another thing to consider with this is the fact that they might not score as high in the technical areas. In other words, according to the rubric in those technical areas, it might actually score lower because they didn't really have that much to do with the technical part or of the process itself, since it's being done by mechanical means. So you need to take that into consideration. Maybe it wasn't quite as creative. That should be taken into consideration too. So we need to step back from selecting pieces of artwork just because they're slick and look amazing and the technical qualities of it. We need to think about the creativity of the piece. We need to think about the fact of how well designed it was, and we actually need to look at it based upon the not just the process, but what was the intent behind the artwork. And so because of that, that might affect the scores that you give this artwork. So consider all of these things, and hopefully this will give you a good idea of how to consider these new types of artworks that are being produced by mechanical means. If you have any questions, please ask your jury foreman or maybe the director for your region. Thank you very much.